Hi, EDSP 5383. I am Lauren Gillespie, and this is my Anatomy of the Eye video. I'm going to start by talking about the outermost layer of the eye. So I'm going to start with the conjunctiva. So when you're looking at the eye just with your naked sight, you see a white part of the eye, kind of around the colored part. So the conjunctiva is actually the clear tissue that resides over the white part of the eye. The function of this is for protection. Another cool thing that the conjunctiva does is that it loops under the eyelid and actually helps form your eyelids. So say you get an eyelash in your eye, there's no risk of that eyelash rolling around out the inside part of your eye. The conjunctiva will catch it. The conjunctiva can get infected. So when you kind of have a pinkish or reddish eye, that's the blood vessels in the conjunctiva reacting to the infection. They're dilating. The next part of the eye I'm going to talk about is the sclera. So you can kind of see, I'm going to zoom in here, a few different layers of the eye. So the sclera is actually the white part of the eye I kind of just talked about briefly. It's a thicker layer that kind of holds the eye together and maintains its shape. It's also the layer that the muscles that move the eye are attached to. The layer underneath the sclera is called the choroid. This is a deeply pigmented layer where a lot of the blood vessels are. The blood vessels are what helps nourish the final layer, the retina, which contains the photoreceptors and the bipolar cells that collect the information about sight that we'll kind of talk a little bit more about later. I'm going to move now to the anterior part of the eye. I'm going to zoom in here. Oops. Zoom in here so we can see it a little better. So I'm going to start by talking about the cornea. So this is this layer of the eye. The cornea, move this a little over so you can see it better. The way that I remember the cornea is I wear contacts. So in the morning when I'm putting my contact lens, I think my contact lens is kind of the exact same shape and size of the cornea because I'm putting it right on top of my cornea. The next layer the next kind of function and part of the eye that's really important is I'm going to talk about the ciliary body. So the ciliary body is this muscle kind of right here and right here. There's a lot of things that it does, and I'm going to cover that. But it extends and it becomes the iris. So the iris is that colored part of your eye. The function of the iris is to control the size of the pupil in response to light. So it dilates the pupil and it also contracts the pupil in response to whatever is happening in the environment. And so the iris is an extension of the ciliary body. The ciliary body is responsible for also controlling the size of the lens. So this big piece that you see right here is the lens. The lens helps the eye focus on objects that might be close up, but it also helps see objects that are far away. So when you're trying to focus on something that's close up, your ciliary body will contract. And in response to the ciliary body contracting, these suspensory ligaments that actually connect the ciliary body to the lens will make the lens more constricted. And this helps us focus on objects that are closer up. It refracts the light in such a way that we can see those objects a little bit better. And then when we're seeing in the distance, we're looking far away, this ciliary body will relax, and in response to that, the ciliary ligaments will relax the lens, and it will stretch out to help us see the object that is farther away, which I think is pretty cool. Something that I learned by viewing some of the videos is in older age, we've probably all noticed it gets a little bit harder to see close up. Like our parents and grandparents probably wear glasses to read. This is because the elasticity of the lens becomes a little bit less elastic as we age. So when the ciliary bodies tense up, so that the lens gets all contracted so we can see that close-up object or read a book, it doesn't quite get as round as it used to be. So it's a little bit harder. So we need a little help from glasses or contacts. One of the other functions of the ciliary body is that it produces a liquid called aqueous humor. So the aqueous humor helps nourish the lens in the anterior compartment of the eye. It flows from the ciliary body through the lens, nourishes the lens, and then it moves into this anterior chamber. And it gets drained out through the canal of Schlemm. There's canal of Schlemm on kind of both sides of the eye, you can see here. When someone has glaucoma, what can happen is the canal of Schlemm gets blocked, and so the aqueous humor has nowhere to drain, so there's just a phenomenal amount of pressure happening in the anterior chamber of the eye. What can happen with time is that the pressure causes the back of the eye to detach from the optic nerve, and that can cause blindness. I thought that was very interesting. The next part of the eye, I'll zoom out a little bit because we're going to start moving back into the vitreous chamber, is called the oris aurata. So the oris aurata is this kind of rigid, grooved line, for lack of a better word, that connects the anterior part of the eye, so right where the ciliary body will meet the anterior chamber of the vitreous chamber of the retina. That is called the oris aurata. So we're going to move kind of towards the back of the eye now. The vitreous chamber, I can zoom this up a little bit more. The vitreous chamber is filled with, like the anterior part of the eye is filled with aqueous humor, which is more of a water-like liquid substances that helps nourish that part of the eye. The back part of the eye, the vitreous chamber, is nourished by a substance called vitreous humor that's a little bit more jello-like to help it keep its shape. It's a little thicker. So we're going to talk about the macula. So you can see here there's a little divot in the back part of the eye. This is the place that we call the center of sight, our center of vision. It's called the macula. It's a very dense region that's highly populated with photoreceptors, where we receive a lot of our information about sight. In the middle of the macula is something called the fovea centralis. The fovea centralis is the center of the macula, and it's extremely dense with a photoreceptor called cones. Cones are the photoreceptor that allow us to see color. So there's red, green, and blue cones. A common form of color blindness is red-green color blindness. So that means that that person might be missing either red or green cones, which is very interesting. So that's the fovea centralis. And then right here is the optic disc that people also call the blind spot. So the optic disc is the area in the retina layer, and the retinal layer that is where the optic nerve kind of leads out and eventually will connect to the back part of our brain that relays sight information. The optic disc is a blind spot, so there's no photoreceptors right here. A really fun test is if you look at just a white sheet of paper with a black line on it and just cover one eye and focus on that white line and kind of move your eye up and down it, eventually you'll be able to find your blind spot. Eventually there'll be a spot in the line that you just stop seeing and you're finding that optic disc, that blind spot in your retina, which is pretty cool. So the photoreceptors send signals to the optic nerve that will then move those action potentials to a part of your brain that will then interpret it as sight as we know it. So that is my presentation about the anatomy of the eye. Thank you so much for listening.